Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast, where you get to learn everything you want to know about addiction and recovery. I'm your host, Angela Pugh, co-founder of Kansas City Recovery, life coach, and recovering alcoholic. To learn more about me, you can listen to episode 0 on your podcast app or find us on the web at addictionunlimited.com. Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Angela Pugh. Thank you for hanging out with me today, listening to the pod. I'm happy to spend some time with you. And this is episode number 75. I realized I don't ever give you guys episode numbers. So it's probably hard to track. Like when you open it in the app for sure, like there are never episode numbers. So I'm going to start doing that. I don't want to put them in the title because Apple Podcasts has some weird issue with episode numbers in the titles, which is why I stopped doing it to begin with. But I will start putting it in the first line of the description. So right under the title, in that description, the first thing you'll see is episode on this one, episode number 75. So I'll start putting that for you guys. Also, I think it'll make it easier when I reference episodes and tell you, oh, so-and-so was on this episode, go back and listen to it. It might be easier to find that way too. And I think you're going to love our topic today too. We're going to talk about your sober bank and the quality of the deposits you're making in your sober bank and how much you are investing in your sober bank and filling that up to create some really good long-term sobriety. So we're going to get to that in just a second. A couple of things first. I got a review the other day. I was actually getting on the airplane. Where am I right now? I'm in Palm Beach and I'm speaking at a conference, and today is actually Wednesday, October 2nd. I'm recording your episode super early morning. It's about 4:30 in the morning right now. And I am speaking later today, but yesterday I was doing live podcasting from the conference, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But when I was getting on the airplane on Monday to fly to Palm Beach for this conference, I got a notification that I got a new review. And this is so beautiful. I literally was like tearing up, you guys, like boarding the airplane, tearing up, kind of ridiculous. But I'm pretty sentimental that way. You know, I don't really cry so much over negative things, but I definitely cry over happy things, you know, those really good, like heart, soul connection kind of things. And this was exactly that experience for me. So it was a 5-star review from Stephanie, and I'm just going to read part of it. It says, Angela, I love you. I'm such a fan. This podcast is wonderful and has literally become a part of my daily routine. I practically binge listen. You put such a different light on sobriety and have changed my outlook on it entirely. I've struggled with alcohol throughout my entire adulthood. And she goes on from there, but this is incredible. Of course, we all love it when somebody tells us that they love us. And I love you too, Stephanie. And thank you so much for taking the time to write a review and for just being amazing, because this is everything that is why I started this podcast, because I know in a certain sense, in my own sobriety, in a certain sense, I am a traditional 12-step AA person, but I knew from the beginning of sitting in 12-step meetings, I'm also really not traditional. And I'm just grateful that I have this kind of rebellious streak that I have, and that I was able to sit in AA and kind of twist it up and do it the way it works for me, and that I wasn't so bothered or discouraged by all the comments I would get and the things that people would say and other AA people telling me that I was making bad decisions or doing something wrong. I just wasn't discouraged by those things because I knew that I had to do it the way it worked for me, because I didn't want to drink anymore. So it didn't bother me so much to get some negative feedback here and there. And I know that's not common. Most people are bothered by that, and that's normal. But I just knew, as I was sitting in those rooms and I was doing my recovery, I just knew that it made sense to me in a different way. And everything, I used to always say to my sponsor, I'd be like, don't AA me right now, because he would want to give me like the one-liners and the cliches. And I love all those things, and they are so powerful. at the same time, sometimes I just wanted to hear it in regular people language. I didn't want to be AA'd. And I know for me throughout the course of my career, at working with clients, working with families, doing interventions, like I have always just been able to articulate recovery and life and AA in a way that wasn't so AA. And I knew that allowed me to connect with people in a different way. So everything that Stephanie said in this review is just so powerful to me, because it literally is the whole reason I started this podcast, because I just wanted to share recovery the way it makes sense in my head, and where there aren't so many sort of rules and regulations and requirements, right? It's just, let's do recovery. Let's get help. Let's do it together. Let's build a solid foundation so that we can have long-term sustainable sobriety, and let's have some fun while we're doing it and make it all make sense. Also, not blowing it out of proportion like we are these horribly broken people, because that's how I felt my whole adult life for sure. I just felt like I was broken beyond repair. I felt like I was fucked up. Something was wrong with me and I didn't know what it was. And that's just not true. Well, maybe that is true, but we are no more fucked up or broken than anybody else on the planet. So I think as people, it's impossible to live life and not be fucked up and broken. That's just the truth, you guys. Everybody is broken. Life will break you. That is just the nature of it. We all have trauma and disappointment and hurt. We all have things we wish didn't happen to us, and circumstances we wish we weren't a part of, and things in our childhood that we wish would have been different. Everybody on the planet has that stuff. So we are no more broken. Those of us who have addiction are no more broken than anybody else in the world. And that's what I really want you to hear. And that's why my approach is always to take all of those life coach practices, all those things I've done in my career as a life coach with people with addiction and without, and take those tools and make it relate to sobriety. Because really that's all we're doing in AA. AA is not some magical, mystical formula. It really isn't. It's the same stuff that the philosophers from the beginning of time talk about. I mean, if you read some of those old school books, Socrates, Aristotle, and I'm not going to get too deep into this stuff because I love it, but I know you probably don't. But it's all the same philosophies from literally the beginning of time. There's nothing magical about any of it. I just like to put it in terms and put it in words so we can relate it to our daily lives. And just get the fuck on with it and live happy and sober. That's all I care about. So that was a really long rant to say thank you to Stephanie for leaving such a great review. Thank you so much. I hope you guys know how meaningful that stuff is to me. Literally, it fuels me to keep going. I love getting feedback from you. It's so important. So I know that you like what I'm putting out too. I love it when you ask questions because that gives me guidance on the information you're really looking for so I can better serve you. Anytime you can leave a review or message me. I love the Facebook group is so good for this. If you are not a member of the Facebook group, get over there and join that group as quickly as possible. It is so supportive. It's completely private, so nobody else on Facebook will know you're in there. It's facebook.com/groups/Addiction Unlimited. And I will link to that in the show notes so you can literally click on it straight from your podcast app and get there. One of the things I love in the Facebook group too is that you talk about your struggles. That's the truth of recovery. That's the truth of life. We have struggles. And it's weird. We can build it up in our heads like we don't want to reach out and talk to people, and we don't want to let people know we're struggling because we feel embarrassed by it or feel like you're not handling things as well as you could be or should be. I don't like that word at all, but we all get stuck running that tape in our heads. And in that Facebook group, I love that all of us will just throw up like, I'm struggling right now. Is anybody else going through this? And the response you get is phenomenal. So, all of that being said, let's talk about the sober bank and what kind of deposits you're making in your sober account. I want you to think about this really as your number one job in sobriety, especially in early sobriety. Your number one job is to make deposits in this sober account. I also want you to look at this like an investment account. This isn't about instant gratification. We do get some instant gratification because you get to stay sober. If you're making solid deposits, you get to stay sober. And there's great instant gratification in that. But I want you to look at it really too as a long-term investment account. This is for your future. This is what we're doing to build a solid foundation for long-term sustainable sobriety. You may be less motivated some days because you want some instant gratification. It doesn't feel like you're getting great rewards. When you're doing something to build your future, there isn't instant gratification, right? You don't feel that reward in the moment as soon as you do it. You don't always get the accolades or the motivation to continue, right? It's kind of like you have to keep trudging the road, even without getting a constant pat on your back telling you you're doing a good job. And that's just how it is. It's the same way in life, right? Listen, I had to trudge along doing this podcast for months and months and months and a million hours, recording podcasts, editing, doing all the social media to promote the podcast. Like I didn't have any instant gratification, but you keep doing it because you're working toward the long term, because you know you're building something, you're building a strong foundation to make it really good so that when it does start to get some momentum, just like your sobriety will, you've built the foundation right so it's strong. But sober, especially in the beginning, doesn't always feel good. You may be tired a lot, having problems sleeping, right? You guys have heard me talk about this. Sleep is a huge issue for me, but it has been my whole life because of the committee. You know, I remember even being a teenager and not sleeping well because the committee was just always going. Of course, I didn't call it the committee back then. That didn't come until much later, but I just always had that anxiety. You know, the committee is just anxiety, just chattering away and twisting things up and blowing things out of proportion. That's all anxiety. That's what the committee is. And sleep is a huge issue for people when they get sober. I hear the guys in my sober living houses talk about this a lot too, just really struggling to sleep. Also, in the beginning, your anxiety may be super high. And all of those things, tired, problem sleeping, high anxiety, all these things make it even more challenging to make sure you're making deposits in your sober bank. But I want you to look at everything you do in your daily life as a deposit or a withdrawal, right? You've heard me say this before too. Everything I do is one step closer to my sobriety or it's one step closer to a drink. Same concept. I want you to think about all the little moves you make as a step closer to making a deposit in your sober bank or as making a withdrawal from your sober bank. And if you spread out your sober investments in different mediums, right, using different things, then you start to learn things and it starts to feel good. And then you get really interested in it. And then you start to practice what you're learning. And eventually it just becomes second nature. You start making better choices. You start feeling better. Your sober bank starts growing and it just becomes who you are. But in the beginning, it takes practice, right? We have to practice feeding our sobriety and making deposits in that sober bank. And what I mean when I say, if you spread out your sober investments in different mediums, I mean, utilize everything you have at your fingertips, right? Different mediums, meaning video, social media, podcasts, writing. I want you to use every medium possible to be making deposits in your sober bank. So, put some things on your Instagram account that are great sober people things that are inspiring or funny sober people things. There is so much stuff on Instagram that is awesome. Make sure you follow me too, by the way, at Addiction Unlimited. Don't forget about me. But there are some great people, and you can even go on my Insta, go at Addiction Unlimited on Instagram, and you can go in my followers and get a million awesome, sober people to follow on Instagram. And there are people, I'm telling you, they're hilarious. They post the greatest stuff and inspirational stuff. And of course, the Addiction Unlimited Instagram is super powerful. We love to be sober. We're killing it sober. Don't get in our way because we're the most badass people on the planet. So that's what you can get from my Instagram. But use that in a moment when your anxiety is high or you're feeling a little down or you don't know what to do in your next moment. Jump on your Insta and get some inspiration, right? Taking a few minutes and doing that, that's making deposits in your sober bank. Go to a meeting. If you're down with meetings, that's making a deposit in your sober bank. Jump online and get on one of the online sober people magazines and read something about being sober lifestyle, or you can go on thefix.com. The Fix is a really great online sober magazine. And they have all kinds of things about policy change, right? At a government level, what's happening with addiction and laws and the opioid crisis. They have a ton of lifestyle stuff. They have a killer blog. There's so much great information on there, and that is making a deposit in your sober bank. My favorite one that I would love to talk about is, you hear me talk all the time about being of service. Doing service work, which is volunteering yourself and your time. And the process of being of service is building up your sober bank. And being of service, as much as we are giving of ourselves and our time to other people, being of service really is being of service to yourself. The service you give yourself and your sober bank creates the sobriety you have tomorrow and next month and next year. All these little actions you take on a daily basis create your future sobriety. Any of those little things that you can do to be making deposits in your sober bank, I want you to think about it every single day. We need to be doing these things. And here's some other ways you can make deposits in your sober bank. And when I say go to meetings, I don't care what meetings. It doesn't matter to me what program you choose. I don't care if it's AA or Smart Recovery or Celebrate Recovery or Refuge Recovery or whatever the hell else recovery you find. Doesn't matter to me at all. The important thing is that you are making a commitment to do something to feed your sobriety, to make that deposit in your sober bank, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. Don't get hung up on what it is. It's just important that you're doing something and having that commitment to yourself and the commitment to your sobriety. Having conversation with other sober people who have the same struggles, especially if you share your own story and share yourself, that makes a huge deposit in your sober bank. Go to meetings, be of service, volunteer somewhere. It can be at an event or with kids or at an animal shelter, whatever makes you happy. If you volunteer at a recovery center or a treatment center, a local detox or something involving addiction recovery, then that will 10x your deposit. That's 10 times bigger deposit because it's bigger sober deposit and bigger feeding your sobriety. But I don't care if it involves addiction and recovery. If you're not somebody that's out and loud about your recovery, then don't volunteer that way. But volunteer somewhere doing something you love. And remember too, this isn't tied to your self-worth, okay? Don't get it twisted. This isn't tied to your self-worth. If you're not doing this perfectly right from the beginning, it does not mean you are a bad human. Okay, don't make those connections. You are a fantastic human. This stuff takes practice. You guys, you have to practice. This doesn't come naturally to us. These are learned behaviors. Just like so much of our addiction is learned behavior. I promise you, my Public humiliation was not something I was born with. It took practice. I had to learn. I had to learn how to drink so much and overdrink and all the things that I did as a drunk, right? Those are all learned behaviors. And recovery is learned behavior. So don't beat yourself up and start getting in this dialogue with the committee about what a bad person you are if you're not doing these things. This does not decide your value as a human being. Okay? And also think about this. If you're wondering if you're doing a good job and if you're really making deposits in your sober bank, your sobriety and recovery will always be a direct result of the deposits you make in your sober bank. Your recovery never lies, and the strength of your recovery is always a direct reflection of the deposits you are making. This means if you are stuck in a pity party and your negativity is high, your problem-solving skills and your ability to make healthy deposits will be low. So don't get stuck in those moments, okay? And when you feel bad or you feel down or you think nothing is working, that doesn't mean it's not working. It's totally working. I promise you. We just have these moments where we feel like we're spinning our wheels. You feel like nothing's happening, but that doesn't mean nothing's happening. The committee's going to try to convince you of that, right? Because the committee wants you to feel bad. So the committee is going to start telling you nothing's working. But just because you're not feeling some sort of gratification, and you might have a day or a week that you don't feel like there's forward movement in your sobriety, that doesn't mean there's not forward movement, right? I go through this a lot myself. Like I'll hit a plateau and I'm not very good at being still. I need constant forward motion. So the moment I feel like something's not working, man, the committee gets a hold of it and will just start going to town. And it will get me down. It does. And I have to just coach myself through it, right? I have to coach myself through and remember that typically when you hit a space where it feels like nothing's working and you start to get really down and you start questioning everything, that's normally the space you're in right before you have a huge breakthrough. And it's the same way, every area of life, same way for me, in business, in the podcast, in everything. So when you catch yourself in that moment and second guessing everything you're doing and wondering if it's the right thing and wanting to get a case of the F-its and just say F it and drink again, when you have that moment, I want you to understand that's the moment right before a breakthrough. So stay on track. Keep making deposits in your sober bank. Do not let the committee convince you that it's not working, because the committee lies. The committee has a really terrible lying problem. And I want you to remember that. The committee cannot be trusted most of the time. Again, especially in early sobriety, the committee is definitely not trustworthy. It has a whole different agenda than what you have. Just bear that in mind. I want you to make these deposits in your sober bank every day. How can you add value to your sobriety? Make deposits. Get better at the value of the deposits. Do not expect immediate returns, and measure the value of your sober deposits by looking at your recovery and how healthy it feels. Notice I didn't say how good it feels, because it won't always feel good. But how healthy are you being, and how healthy are your sober deposits? How healthy are you being in your life? And we all know healthy choices from unhealthy choices. We all know that, right? When it comes to food, when it comes to behavior, when it comes to how we approach our lives, how we approach our relationships, I know when I'm snapping at somebody and I shouldn't be snapping at them. I know when I need to go back and make amends. I know that's the healthy thing to do. I know it's the healthy thing to do to have a smoothie instead of French fries, right? Like, we know what we're doing here, people. So don't try to play dumb either, because the committee will try to play dumb. Don't let it convince you and fall in that trap, because we know better. We're grown and we know better. So how healthy are you being in your life, and how healthy are your deposits? Not how good does it feel, because there's plenty of time we're not going to feel good, but how healthy are you being, and be proud of that. And don't let a plateau get you down. A plateau is okay. We're going to go through plateaus. Also, we were just talking about this on group coaching on Monday night. You have to have hard moments so that you get to practice your new behavior, so that you get to put all these things we talk about into practice in your life and prove to yourself how strong you are, right? If I don't have hard moments where I'm really tested and I make it through those hard moments, then I will remain unsure if I'm able to make it through hard moments. So the universe has to throw you some hard times. It has to. It's going to test you. It's going to put you in situations that are uncomfortable so that you can troubleshoot and use your new skills and get through those situations. Then when you get on the other side, you're like, holy shit, look at me. Look what I did. Look what I can do now. That's how you build your sober confidence. That's how you build your life confidence. You have to have hard times, and you have to get through those times to show yourself you can. So don't be upset when you have hard times. It's just part of it. And I'll tell you what, too, when you really start making some big life changes, just like sobriety, and you start getting really comfortable in your conviction, right? You get super committed. You're like, F everything. I'm doing this. I'm getting sober. I'm going to commit to this like I've never committed to it before. I'm all in. I'm going to do everything I need to do. When you get there, I absolutely promise you, the universe is going to throw you a curveball. It's going to put you in an uncomfortable party situation, or you're going to get the phone call out of the blue, somebody that you haven't heard from in a long time, and you're going to really want to go hang out with that person, but you know deep down inside you really shouldn't go hang out with that person. That's the universe throwing you a curveball to test you. You will be tested, I promise you. So don't fall for it. Don't let it get you down. Don't let it take you off your path. You stay on your path that you know is the right path for you, that you know is the healthy path for you. Keep making those sober deposits and do the right thing. Okay? I hope you guys love the Sober Bank. And remember, I will link to everything in the show notes so you can click directly from your podcast app and get to the Facebook group, my Instagram @Addiction Unlimited. Don't forget, all the tools you need, you can find at My Recovery Toolbox. I will link to that in the show notes as well. Keep those reviews coming, you guys. And if you loved this episode, don't forget to share it with somebody. Be of service. Remember, that's what we're here for. Be of service. But share this episode, or if you have another one you loved, share it, you guys. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Have a great day, and I will see you next week.
You've reached the end of another great episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. Candid and honest conversation about addiction and recovery. Be sure to visit us at addictionunlimited.com to join the conversation and access show notes and links to everything we talked about. Love this episode? Please take 30 seconds to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes to help us improve and give you the information you want. Thanks for listening. See you next week.